What's up, guys? Welcome back to another one. Today we are doing, as you can tell by the title, we're cutting up a pig. I'm going to show you guys how to break down a hog or a pig or pork or whatever you want to call it with minimal tools. It'd be a whole lot easier if everybody just had, one of these, a big power saw, but not everyone has one. So I'm going to show you guys how to break it down with a handsaw and a knife. That's all I'm going to use. Hopefully you guys could be able to use some of this information, be able to, do your own at home if you want. Okay, first thing we're gonna do is pull out the leaf lard. This here, and the kidney here, I don't want that. This here is the cream of the crop of fat. If you wanna make lard for making like pastries and pies and stuff like that, best you can get. Take this, cook it down, gives you the best lard. I'm saving all my fat today as well. All right, so there's a little hanging tender in here. I'm gonna take that out. Take off some of the gland there. And now I'm just gonna trim up some of this here. Throw that away. Okay, so right here on the underside where this connects is I like to come in and just peel that down a little bit. That there. And then I do 3 ribs. I want as much pork chop as I can get because they're pork chops. So I do 3 ribs. So I go 1, 2, 3, and then that is where I make my cut there. Just using a straight up old handsaw here today. So from where the tail to the H-bone here is, I want to go just a little bit inside of the H-bone just to clip the tail. And make a cut there. Once you get through the bone, you can stop. Then I want to break through there. There's the shoulder. There's your ham. We'll get to that in a little bit though. And there. Okay, so just real quick before I get too far into this, you have a ham, your loin, this is where your chops come from, your ribs, and then your bacon lays on the outside of the ribs. Here on the front shoulder, your jowl, neck bones. This much will be your pork butt or Boston butt pork shoulder, picnic, front shank, and the head. So that's kind of how it breaks down. This right here is the tenderloin. We're gonna pull that out today. Okay, so we've set everything aside. We're gonna work on the middle part here. So first what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull up my tenderloin because we're gonna be making these boneless chops because it's really hard to cut chops with a handsaw real consistently. So we're gonna make them boneless because that's the easiest thing to do. So up here, the tenderloin runs from here all the way up to here. So you wanna go and just take your tip of your knife there and cut in and just work it out. You can run right along the spine the entire way. And then just follow the bone and the seam, and that'll pretty much get you what you want to know. It'll get you what you want done. Once you get it loosened up, you can just pull it out. That is a pork tenderloin. We'll clean that up here in a little bit. I went and turned it around. We're gonna wanna make a cut from almost right where the bottom of this bone is, straight down, all the way over to where the tenderloin was. So we're gonna make a cut right there. Once you get through the ribs, you can just take your knife and make it the rest of the way out. All right, so now I got my pork loin and my bone-in belly. On the rib section here, I like as much bacon as I can get because it's bacon. I want as much. I'm not as fond of ribs. They're great to smoke and stuff like that, but I would rather have bacon. So if you want meatier ribs, keep your knife just a little bit further away from the rib and try and leave a little bit of meat on. For me, I put my knife as close on those ribs as I can and just cut them right down to all the way down the bone. If you can catch a couple ribs at a time, it'll help you keep your knife a little bit flatter on the ribs. All the way down, there's one tiny one. Now, the ribs, they turn into soft rib bones once they get down a little bit further, which, you can tell pretty quick by how bendy it is. So down here on the small end, I like to just go ahead and grab that last rib and pull on it. And then just use your knife just to sort of loosen stuff off. It's sort of a curve down here where those ribs are, but you can tell pretty quick. If you cut through one, just go in, find them again, and try and get them out. Because bone in your bacon is not great. There's ribs. Now you can go through and you can take your knife and just like that. And then you cut that off. We'll bone that off later. There is a set of ribs. I call them shiners because I take all the meat off the backside, but they still got a pretty decent amount of meat on the bottom. So they're not horrible for smoking. They're just not as meaty as something you'd get, at the grocery store. Now that leaves us with our belly here. In the one corner, there's normally a little piece of soft bone from when you cut it off the shoulder. So I try and make sure I get that out. Up here on this end, normally I leave about 3 to 4 inches of the belly, or you can see kind of where it changes shape a little bit. And we'll just go and we'll cut it straight off there. I'm gonna square it up a little bit, take off this outside edge, flip it over, make sure that there's no, I'm doing skinned hogs, so every once in a while you have a little rough spot like that, where there is a little bit of the hair root left on it. And I'm just gonna take that off. There we go. There is a slab of belly. I take these, cure them, make bacon out of them. I mean, if you guys wanna see a how to make bacon video, I can try and show you a simple old-fashioned style bacon. So let me know if you wanna see that. Okay, now with the loin. I want to take most of the fat off of this. It makes it a whole lot easier to do later. So what I do is I use the back part of the knife. This is one of the few places where I actually use the back part. And I'm just going to slice off fat. Trying to control a little bit and not get too much meat. If you get a little bit of meat, there. Some people hate the idea of putting a lot of fat in their sausage. It's not as much as you think it is. I mean, don't throw a lot of it in there. But if you like, if you don't want to make ham, put that in the grind. It'll lean it up a lot. You can put more fat away in your trim. Roll this thing over. I'm going to take more fat off. Save your fat, especially if you're a deer hunter. Mix it in with that. If you don't like pork fat, I mean, you can throw it also, or you can cook it down and make lard too. On the end that does not have the tenderloin, so on this the ribeye end of it here, there is going to be part of the shoulder blade. Get your thumb on that, and you'll pull up, and you'll see a seam sort of appear. So you just use your knife a little bit. And you can pretty much almost pull it off. It's a little bit easier to cut it, but just loosen the bottom side, run that all the way up. Okay, on this end, the sirloin end of the hog is where the ham was. If you run along here, you'll be able to feel where the sirloin starts and the loin starts. Take your knife and just cut down in through there. Then you can just take it, lay it on its back where the spine is down, and you can just break it off. There's a pork sirloin. We'll mess with that later. All right, so now we have a bone-in loin. And what we're gonna do is your ribs here, just follow those as tight against the rib as you can. All the way down to the spine. After the ribs stop, there is going to be some little flat bones in here. Those are a little bit harder to get right up against, but well, I'm going to take this meat off the inside of them here. That way we can see them a little easier. Put that in trim. Any meat scraps that you get, throw in there. It makes great sausage. So these little flat bones here, take your knife and just get on the back side of them. And follow them down also. Okay, now up on this side, you want to do the exact same thing, except they're all these little flat bones. Okay. Now once you get to that point, they're still going to be connected a little bit most times right at the base, and you just have to go and the base of the rib, there's a little knot basically where there's a little kind of a joint, and you just have to take your knife and just go around it basically. They're really annoying because they always seem to have the wrong shape. There we go. Now we have a boneless pork loin. You can trim it up a little bit more if you want, and then you can also, it has a big lip on it depending on how close you get your initial cut when you take it off the belly. So I'm just gonna knock off a little bit of that. And you can trim that off after you get done cutting pork chops. It's a whole lot easier then to see exactly what you're doing. I'm just gonna square this up a little bit. I always start from the opposite side that my knife is in. It feels awkward. Believe me, I know. You're gonna wanna start here and just go down. Start on the opposite side and you'll be able to get a whole lot more even cuts. If you start on this side, it's real easy to start getting what I call doorstop steaks or chops because you don't get an even slice. It's a whole lot easier to see exactly what you're doing from this side. Okay? Nice pork chop there. And you can just do that, cutting these about 1 inch, and you just go down the entire loin like that. Makes nice chops. If you want a bigger chop, just cut part of the way down. Don't cut all the way through, and do it again. And then you have a butterfly chop. Okay, so on your sirloin, this is the end that we knocked off of our loin. What you want to do, I probably should have taken the fat off, made it a little bit easier on myself, but where the tailbone was, where the loin, you want to just lay your knife right up against that and just follow it all the way down against the big bone here as well. And it sort of has a curving sweep to it. So you can see it sort of does a little weird shape there. You can make a roast out of this, then make a pretty decent roast, but you can just make great little chops out of them as well. So what I like to do is I like to knock off this bit of muscle there, trim it up just a little bit. Now I'm going to square them up and just make chops out of them. Now you see I didn't trim them at all before. You can just go through then and just knock the fat off, and you have a nice little trimmed up sirloin chop. So those are pretty good. I'll put them up against anything. I love them, and it's a great way to get more pork chops out of your hog. Okay, here we have our ham. I'm going to show you how to trim it all out to make a ham, you know, that you can get either cured or if you do want to do it yourself. If you cut through a little bit of the tail, there should be a little bit of a bone there. Throw that away. And I like to take off most of the fat on my ham. So it's just basically trimming. Try not to get down into the meat. Leave a little bit of fat on it if you can. So we're just going to peel the fat off of it. If I was going to leave the hock on it, I'm going to cut this down a little bit here. You can go and take the handsaw and knock it right there. Basically, you're just trying to get this joint off. Don't get too far into it. You're just trying to get that knot off right there. See? There's a ham. This is a whole ham. You can take it to a processor. They can cure it and smoke it for you most times, or you can try it yourself. It's all up to you. You can also go through and just cut them up into roasts. You can cut them into steaks. That's a little bit harder to do. I'm going to show you how to knock the hock off of it really quick, because that's something I do, because I typically don't want this on my ham. I do want a ham, so I'm not going to bone it off. For the hock, when you're on this end, you can feel there's a seam right there. It's pretty obvious if you poke around a little bit. You just want to follow that up until you hit, there's a joint right up here. And you'll be able to see it if you stay pretty close. You can just cut down through that joint and peel out the hock. Hock, You can also cure and smoke that. Make yourself some beans. Now, this muscle here is a little bit less tender. I like to just sort of straighten it off. Like that. There you go. There's a ham. The shoulder. Okay. The first thing that I like to do with the shoulder is right underneath the spine, there's a little bit of meat that runs on the neck bone. I like to pull that out. It just makes a little bit less work for later when you go to bone that off. Unless you want to keep your neck bones for like soup or something like that, then you can leave that on there, it adds a little bit more meat. But I don't save them, so I just go ahead and bone it off. Take it and put the jowl away from you, and you'll be able to see where the spine was and the ribs. So what you want to do is you want to take your knife and go right underneath the ribs. Stay as close to them as you can, okay? And just sort of cut up into the ribs, and just sort of, and you want to follow that bone all the way out. Now take your knife and go and follow up to the spine and out. And then I spin it and I pull on these neck bones right here, and so I can see down here, and I just use the tip of my knife and just try and cut around the neck bones and just pull it out. Small cuts if you can, you'll have a nicer shoulder at the end. We'll bone those off later. Okay, so now we have our shoulder with the neck bones gone. The flap down here, this is the pork brisket. I like to just square off nice and flat to try and make it even. Typically, it'll be from about the elbow of the pig here. Be a little bit up above that. Once you've taken that off, next thing I do is knock off my jowl. So you can kind of see where it gets a little bit uneven. Just make a straight line and knock that off. Throw that up there for later. Now I take the fat off is what I do next. So I like to cut off this edge here, flip it over, and just take the fat off. Don't take too much off though if you're going to smoke these things. A little bit of fat cover is good for you. Helps keep it nice and moist, and it just adds a lot of flavor for your pulled pork if you're doing that. Now that I've got nice and taken down, I'm going to flip it back over, and I want my first cut to be there. And then this one's a little bit harder to explain. Yeah, you want to cut right there. There is a joint in there. You want to just kind of get pretty close to that. But normally it's about half of the entire thing to make a shoulder butt. You can go a little bit further down if you want, but yeah, just straight across there. So first I'm going to knock off my shank. I like to bone that off, make it into sausage. All right, now for this is going to be a little bit more work here. All right, once I'm through the bone, just going to finish it off with the knife. Okay, there is a picnic shoulder. I bone them off to put them in a sausage. You can make a roast out of it. If you want to make a roast, just take your knife, and then on the big side of the bone, just follow that bone down. There's a nice boneless roast. You can take some of the fat off of it. If you want another roast, you can make one there. Otherwise, I'm just gonna put them to sausage. So there is a whole pork shoulder. If you're gonna make pulled pork or something like that, leave it like that. If you want smaller ones, you wanna cut it the opposite of how you made your cuts to get the picnic off. So you'd wanna make your cuts like this, depending on how big. This here is probably about a 9-pound shoulder. So, you know, if you go a little bit less, cut it in half, thirds, however. Or if you want to make some steaks out of it, really hard to do with a hand saw. So what I would recommend if you want some little shoulder steaks is on the meat side here, find your bone and just follow it all the way out. Like that. And now you're left with just the biggest boneless piece. And then you can cut it into steaks however you want that way. It's a great way to get a little bit more steak or chop material. It's not quite as tender as a pork loin would be, where your normal pork chops, but they have a little bit more marbling. I think they have better flavor. It's up to you, but it also makes great sausage, pulled pork, roast, whatever you want to do that way. If you wanted your baby back ribs, where you took your loin off of, those are your baby backs. There's not much meat on them if you do it this way. You're gonna have to leave some pork chop on there if you want meaty baby backs. But I prefer to just take them off like this, bone them off. It's a whole lot easier. Got our pork tenderloin again. And this, you could pretty much just grab the fat and peel it off. And there's gonna be a chain on this side, another little piece of meat. Gonna work that off with the knife. There's some silver skin there. You can take that off as well, but there's a nice little pork tenderloin. That's kind of the main gist of everything. We got pork chops, tenderloin, we got ribs if you want them, ham, bacon, hock, your shoulder, and your trim. The trim wise, you're just taking the meat off the bone, throw it in there. I'm gonna bone it off. I'll do a little time lapse here of that. If they sent you the head, or you're able to get the head, there's a lot of meat on here that you just did not know existed, probably. First thing is right down here in front of the eyes. There is a nice little pocket of meat there. Then the cheeks. Just put your knife in right up against the bone, cut it all the way down till it stops, and then cut in. Same way on the inside. The inside's a whole lot smaller than the outside is. You can get that out. For the inside, I just go in, find the bone, cut all the way down, and then cut over, instead of trying to come in from this side. The last one is a whole lot harder to get. It's the meat right behind the eyes. You have to take the knife, you go in, and you have to cut real deep. And it's a weird shape. I'll show you once I get this out. It's kind of a kidney bean shape, but it's really long, and it's kind of difficult to get, but I mean, it's a chunk of meat, so it's worth going after. All right, there's a hog's head. Just to show you how much meat was on a hog's head. Got an extra pound and a third just off of the head. It's worth going after. I'm gonna go ahead and get this stuff boned off, and then I'll put it all back together, kind of show you where all the stuff came from again, and that'll probably pretty much do it. If you guys wanna see some like sausage making stuff, videos on that, let me know. I'll do what I can. Just need you guys to tell me what you guys wanna see. When you get to the jowl, make sure you cut through it a bunch, because if there's going to be an abscess, this is a pretty popular spot for that. If you hit an abscess, you'll know. It looks like green pudding. There you go. That's about as easy as it gets at home. Do it yourself with minimal tools. I hope that it helps you guys. If you like the video, please hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe if you haven't. Let me know if there's something else you guys want to see. I'm more than happy to do what I can, whether it is doing some more stuff with minimal tools, using bigger tools. You guys gotta let me know. Anyway, thanks, and we'll see you on the next one.